Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third Hangout for One.7 Design Patreon. I am joined once again, as always, by Jonathan Walton and new guest this time, Judd Karlman.
Hello.
I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves for posterity's sake on the video. Jonathan?
Sure. You probably know me already. I've been on 2 of these so far. I'm currently working on a game called Restless. I live in San Diego, PhD student at University of San Diego. So that's me.
Hi, and I'm Judd. I'm a librarian at New York City, and I don't think I'm really working on anything. I'm jotting a bunch of crap down in notebooks, but I don't think I'm really, and it's not work yet. It's just useless crap at this point. And that's good. That's fine. I'm comfortable with that, obviously, because I'm being real defensive about it. And what else? I've done a little bit of freelancing, a little bit of game design here and there, but most of the time I'm just kind of vomiting up AP threads up on Get Yankee Diaspora on my blog and doing this and that.
Cool. Actually, you just said 2 things, Jed, that really got my mind going.
Awesome.
One, filling notebooks with stuff is one of my favorite topics, and Jonathan and I have talked about it a lot as our main job as a game designer, to constantly fill up notebooks, and making games out of those is like the production side of things. I feel kind of the way that the editor makes the movie after it's already been shot. The editor kind of puts it together, and I don't mean that dogmatically, but I mean that as like in my own mind. It helps me to think about when I'm trying to design a game. If I think about all the time I spend jotting ideas in a notebook as really productive time, it kind of frees up my mind a little bit to think, to not feel like I'm wasting my time doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I totally hear that. I feel like it's just that transition. It's the transition of getting it from a notebook into a Google document, and then a Google document, kind of a playtestable document, and then saying to friends, "Hey, let's gather and do this." That's, I think, the rub for me most of the time, or it has been for the past 2 years or so. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Hey, Judd, does the stuff that you write in notebooks, does it mostly come out of games that you're running and playing, or is it a mixture of that and sort of speculative stuff about what you might do in the future, or like what kinds of where does that stuff come from for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes it's stuff I'm playing. I'm playing D&D now, so there's a lot of like random encounter tables for different areas. For the game I'm playing now, and sometimes, and I mean, it can be story ideas. It can be there are paragraphs and pages of stories in there that need to find a home, and there are there's a Houses of the Blooded Hack, and some weird D20 sci-fi thing that I don't know what it is yet, but it's just kind of talking to me. So I don't know. Yeah, it can be anything. It really can be anything. And I think that's a nice thing about it is I don't share it. So it doesn't have to be anything. I write, fanfic and anything. And, it's just mine. I don't show it to anyone in the world. It's very much the adult version of the junior high journal, except I'm not writing about how much life sucks, because it doesn't right now. So that's good. But yeah, it's anything. Anything goes in them. And in the past year, I think I filled up about 3. So then it becomes a problem in a New York apartment of like, well, what do you do with them? It's like, what? Eventually, I'm going to have a lot of them. So then what? They're going to have to be like a notebook shelf. It's not particularly sustainable, but we'll see where it goes.
That sounds like a good problem to have to me. Oh no, I have too many notebooks full of awesome ideas.
Yeah, no, hopefully. I want to start bridging that gap between having the notebook and then being like, okay, now I want to get that into a better form, or a Google Drive or something. So I can start sharing and getting feedback from friends.
Yeah, that's super important. I think I hadn't thought about this till right now, but I think I have 2 different processes for that, because I do a lot of writing in notebooks, like with a pen, but I've also started doing little jot ideas down in Google Docs, and that I just realized right now when you said that, my Google Doc interaction for that has gone way up, and I wonder if some part of my mind is like tricking me into skipping the notebook step, or thinking that I want to share it more easily or something. I don't know why I've done that, but it just occurred to me when you said that I think it's more like 80% of the time now I'm using a Google Doc instead of a physical notebook.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't tend to use Google Docs a lot when I'm taking notes for stuff, and part of it's because a lot of my notes for stuff is very visual, right? There's a lot of like drawing circles around things and connecting them with lines to other things, and I think that part of my brainstorming wouldn't work as well in the kinds of digital tools that at least are commonly available now. So I tend to go directly from notebooks full of stuff to like an InDesign document where I can at least use some visual stuff. But it's definitely not the best in terms of like, tracking versions of a text or the kinds of stuff that you want to do in terms of sharing it with other people and stuff like that. So,
yeah. Well, and composing it in InDesign, I think, for me anyway, it helps a lot because I do have a certain target usually in mind that, I want to convey this idea on one piece of paper or in one spread or in one column or in this particular part of the character sheet, and composing inside the layout, I think, really helps me kind of hit that target better. Right? That subconsciously, as I'm typing into the actual text area, like my brain is like editing it into a more compact form or expanding it where it needs to be expanded or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, it helps me anyway when I do that.
Yeah, you design guys who can go right into InDesign are like fucking wizards as far as I'm concerned. I remember the first person who I knew who did stuff like that was Jared, and I was like, oh, you can just get an idea and make it look beautiful, and like the same, he can go from like notebook to PDF, right to it. It just, it is, you can tell by the way I'm talking about it that I'm a caveman talking about fire because I have no idea what it goes into it. It's fucking sorcery to me. It's witchcraft, but it's it's enticing.
There's good and bad things about it, though. I mean, I think what John's saying is a lot of times it makes you start thinking about product design before the game is finished, right? You're already thinking about how do you present it to an audience and like how. And in some ways it's good because it makes you think about how are people actually going to play this thing, how are people actually going to use it, right? It makes you get more practical. But on the other hand, it can sometimes make you reach for more conventional things, right? Because you're trying to make it look familiar and that kind of stuff. So I think they're good and bad things about it.
Especially doing it at first, there's a real danger that you start to love it too much because it looks like a product. It looks finished, and you did some work making the layout work that way. And when someone says, "I don't think you need 5 stats. I think you need 4 stats," like, oh man, I made it look so perfect with 5. Like, can't we just keep that one? It looks good. I don't know if I've struggled with that per se, but it is something to look out for. Although I think I said this before on one of these, but the opposite thing happens too, where like the game I'm working on right now, it had 6 abilities, and they fit the sheet really nicely. And I was revising them and trying to decide, okay, like what exact word should I have for each of these, and how many sort of sub-skills does each one need to have. And through all the playtests of the past year and a half or so, I had this pool of like options that we'd all tried out and which ones are going to make the cut, blah, blah, blah. And as I was doing that, I changed the bottom of the sheet to make more room for notes, because everyone always says they don't want their sheet covered in boxes and stuff. They want a place to write the information. So I made the note thing way bigger, and then I only had room for 4 abilities, not 6. So I thought, well, okay, the notes they're not gonna get as much room as people wanted. But once I had done that cut, the remaining top 4, I stared at them for a while, and I was like, man, these are really this is all we've really been used. Like, we just don't need those other two. We just don't need them.
Yeah.
Accident of the layout kind of informed that next phase, and we've been playing the 1.4 recently.
Oh, nice.
And it's great. And at first, people were like, "Where did it go? What? I'm missing my stuff." But now, it's fine. And so I don't know. It was a little accident. It wasn't on purpose at all. But
Yeah, like a weird visual constraint that you
mm-hmm.
stumbled into and inspired you to do a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It does happen.
And I bet that happens with my notebook writing too, because I use these little little tiny, like this size, little tiny ones, and it's hard to kind of go on at length when a page is so tiny. And I bet that has an effect on my thinking too.
I bet.
I'm not going to write a list of 100 things when I do that. It's probably going to be like 6, and it's going to constrain things in that way probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I bet there's good research on that. And like how page size affects your ideas and stuff. And, should look into that.
Yeah, the other side effect is it makes you kind of a notebook nerd, right? Because you kind of look around and you're like, oh, what kind of notebook?
Yes.
Because like a moleskin is just too much notebook for me. Like I get intimidated by it. It's just too much. There's too much book. It feels like a book. I'm like, no, that's not what I want. It's too formal. I like the kind of flipped notebooks. That feels like a notebook to me. It's like, well, these are just notes. But moleskins they intimidate the shit out of me. I'll start writing and I'll get a little bit in and I'll be like, oh, I don't know.
I feel the same way. I try to get the cheapest ones I can find. It makes me feel better, I guess. They're just it's casual, there's no big deal.
Right.
I'm just writing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like what I have is an eclectic collection of various things that I've been given. Like I have something that I got from Dev that has Boston transit stations on it that he probably gave me 4 years ago that I'm like halfway through. And oftentimes I can't find the one that I'm working with, so I'll move around and I have about 4 or 5 ones that are all kind of partway finished. So there's not like a timeline through them, which sometimes is hard because you're like, I need to find all the ideas I had about this one concept, and they're like spread about 3 or 4 different things. But it's often like picking up some random thing. So they're not all uniform. So I do have a box of them somewhere, and I find that I actually don't go back through them as often as I should. Oftentimes when I'm moving to like the product design stage or something, I just kind of redesign it from scratch out of my head. But it's not like the notebooks aren't part of the process. They are. It's just I don't tend to consult them directly maybe as much as I could. So I don't know what that's about exactly, but
I think I do that too. I think sometimes I do consult it, but it is a little bit like weight training or something. You're getting yourself ready for the thing and keeping your mind in and keeping your brain going in that direction. But yeah, consulting them more is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I sometimes consult them when I get lost. Like I feel like I've lost the train of what this was about or something, and it's helpful to go back and look at like what the crap was I trying to do in the first place, right? Because my design process tends to be very wandery, so sometimes it's good to go back and be like what is this even doing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I do prematurely is I'll make a Google Plus community for it, and I'll invite like some friends to it, which is totally premature. And I have a couple now where it's just like, why did you do that?
Right.
And I don't know if that's ever going to be a game. And it led to a paralyzing question, which I shouldn't have let it paralyze me. I should have asked more questions. But I made a beginning of a game called Rocket Scouts, and then Jason Morningstar asked a brilliant question that I did not have an answer to, and I was like, I don't know. Shut it down. Shut it down. I don't know. I'm not even trying to know what he means. He's just smarter than me. He's smarter than me. I can't do this. I shouldn't be making this game. I'll wait for someone smarter to make it. And it was just stupid. I should have been like, Jason, can you flesh that out a little bit for me? That's a really good thought. Instead, I just let it totally show, like, oh no, Rocket Scouts needs to be made by a smarter person than this one. So yeah, it's interesting. That's my other thing is I'll like make a community and take a lot of care and like picking the picture that goes with the community, and it's yeah, it's like that's my way of being like, well, I can't do InDesign, so I'll make a Google G+ community. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it's interesting all the stuff that you do to kind of make you feel like you're designing the game that aren't actually designing the game. I definitely do a lot of different stuff, like making covers for stuff. Right, it used to be that I used to order art for it, paying hundreds of dollars for games that might never exist. Right, there's like lots of ways to distract yourself from the fact that you aren't actually finishing the game. That still feel productive, and still, because the fun is like oftentimes is engaging with the ideas. Right, it's kind of like the lonely fun of game design. Right, is like all this thinking about what it could be like and like what it'll look like and all this other stuff. Right, and that stuff is all in some ways good as long as you're not wasting too much money. And I mean, it's part of the fun of doing that stuff, right? Like, so it'd be lame not to do any of it, but on the other hand, it is sort of cart before horse in a lot of ways, right? So
I feel like before, I mean, the deal I should make with myself is that before I do a G+ community, I have to have a character sheet and like a playtest document. Like, it's got to be ready to have a shitty game with friends before I do any of this other nonsense. Because there's not a whole, you don't have to have a whole hell of a lot to have that. Particularly when you're generally hacking at games like I generally am. So just getting like a character sheet up and like a notes is all you really need, and then you can just have a shitty night and inflict it on your friends.
I totally agree. I think it can be paralyzing sometimes to think like, oh, I'm going to share this thing. What are people going to think like about me? Maybe when they see this half-assed thing, it reflects on my ego or something like that.
Right.
It's a really normal way to feel, but having anything at all to playtest or react to helps so much. And I think people, at least in our little niche of enthusiastic and kind and critical playtesters, I think it's a fairly safe risk to take, that it's not going to be you're not going to be destroyed by some kind of reaction or something. And the enthusiasm for me is a huge motivator. As soon as even one person is super pumped about it and runs off and plays it that day or something and posts about their experience, and it's like this they're the avatar of the audience, and now I have someone to make the game for that isn't just me and my home group. And that's also for me, because deadlines are always, for hobby projects, deadlines often are hard to hang on to in the face of other paying jobs and stuff. But knowing okay, Strauss is going to be running this 2 weeks from now, I need to have the new version ready for him. That helps a lot for me.
Yeah, it's also amazing to me how fast you can go from having a random half-assed alpha draft to having an actual community of people who are interested in the game, right? It's pretty amazing. I have multiple unfinished games that have audiences, which is bizarre, right? But it's really cool. And like you said, if you put the game out there and it's vaguely playable, whether people pick it up and kind of do their own thing with it, right? Which in some ways, some of John's games kind of require you to do that. You kind of have to pick up the game and kind of do your own thing with it. It can be pretty empowering both for them and for you, right? So I think there's a lot to be said for doing the minimum to get something out there, and then just kind of seeing how it goes. And like you said, you can make a community around it. You can do all sorts of stuff, and sorry, a little sick here. But even if it doesn't become a huge deal, it's still awesome, right? You're informing the play. Your game feeds back into what other people are doing, right? People are like, oh yeah, I stole this idea from this thing that Judd did. That was really cool, and it's sort of part of things. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's a real distinction, I think, between unfinished and unplayable. It's pretty hard, I think. Well, not hard to do, but I think we're we're all fairly good at making something that's playable, whether or not it adheres to the vision for the game or if it's as fun as we want it to be or whatever metric you want to use. But playable that's a pretty low bar, I think, especially with a real experienced community of players. I think that they can bring something. Oh, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the GM paralysis thing. I know you've talked about this before, Judd, where you're prepping for a game, or it's maybe the first session of a campaign, or what you hope is going to be a campaign, or your first-time GM, or something like that, and this lie gets into your head, which is, I have to do this all on my own. The pressure's on me to show up and sort of perform at game night.
Yeah.
Compelling and make it cool and wow them with this cool idea and my NPCs and my setting and da-da-da-da-da-da. And you sort of forget that there are 4 other people at the table, some of whom are smarter and cooler than you, who are just going to be bringing all this like enthusiasm and content and ideas. And I think this touches in the same place where as a designer you can feel like, man, I have to do this all by myself. I have to deliver this awesome document and impress everybody and make them excited and blah, 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 which is true to some degree. But once other people start playing it, then these ideas come in from other vectors you didn't consider, and that bigger group effort starts to come into play, and you're not stuck alone anymore, spinning over a document and trapped inside your own head.
And I know something I used to do when I was GMing and I wanted a high volume of stuff was I would go to my friends who weren't in that game. And I would say, I'm playing Midnight, and I've got this weird family, of the father who is the first guy to go traitor to the evil lord, who's the Sauron equivalent to Midnight, and I need all of the siblings. So just give me sibling ideas. And my gaming buddies from all over would just send me ideas. And the cool thing is there were some that were really useful and actually used in the game, but just as valuable were the terrible ideas. Were the ones who was like, oh, that's wrong. That doesn't belong in my game. Why is that? Oh, because this, and this. And it solidifies all these things in your head. And the bad ideas are as good as the good ideas, really. They're as useful, which is neat. That's something I never would have, the value of an idea that makes you say no is there. It's just there. The fact that there's someone who's willing to, give the feedback, and whether it's an idea for a game that you're GMing or whether it's a playtest process then you see where you dig your heels in and where you think, no, that's not a good idea. Let me tell you why. It makes you kind of verbalize things that probably should end up being in the book and will probably be in the game if you're GMing. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
That crowdsourcing ideas thing is really cool. I still have also really good memories of some of those threads. Like I remember Jason Morningstar's, I think, Rooftop Necropolis thread, where he says, hey, I have this necropolis on my roof. I need to keep the blood mummy somehow. What kinds of crazy traps should I put in it or whatever? I forget exactly what it was, but
yeah.
And those can be really interesting ways to develop an audience around what you're doing too, kind of. And people are like, hey, I want to hear about what happened in your game last week, right? With the crazy.
Right. Yep. I mean, and now there's so many crowds. It's just crazy. And there is I remember I was thinking about using Ars Magica to play in some setting, and I went to the Berkeley group, the infamous Berkeley listserv for Ars Magica, and I was like, hey, I'm thinking of using Ars Magica to play, in this fantasy setting. Do you have any tips? And one guy logged on and said, make sure the economy makes sense. I was like, thanks. That's great. I'm glad we had that conversation. So I guess there is such a thing as useless feedback. I take that back. Yeah, no, I think crowdsourcing is really valuable, particularly in this day and age where, of Twitter and, you make a hashtag and you're off to the races, or you email your friends or you go on a forum or whatever it is. And hopefully it gains some foothold, which is neat. It's a nice way to brainstorm on stuff.
That's a perfect segue into the second thing you said during your intro that struck me, Judd, was you mentioned your AP reports.
Yeah.
It's something I always think about with you because they were not the first time I interacted with you online, I don't think, but early on is how I kind of started reading your stuff because you wrote these really awesome actual play reports.
Thank you.
Also, were like willing to share them kind of with the somewhat wider RPG space,
Right.
like on RPGNet and those kind of places. So they got a little more, attention and more feedback from other types of gamers. But the thing you just said, it kind of touches on what I was thinking when you said that, which is and we've talked about this before, but the value of players and the value of writing about play, I feel like has gotten a lot better from where it used to be. It used to be 100% designer focused, I think, but that's changed a lot.
Yep.
And it could still be better, but that thing you just said about about actual play and sharing stuff and the community aspect, it does touch on game design, not to drag it away from the players necessarily, but just reading APs like your Knives and Deviltry, is that what it was called? About your rogue.
Yes, and my 4E rogue.
Yeah, like it's sort of this gritty first-person account that you were writing, and it was like putting a filter or putting a lens on what was like if you knew 4th edition D&D, you could read his account and you could tell from the fiction like kind of what powers were being used and what the battle space was like, and you could sort of see the theme a little bit, but at the same time it was at the same time it was artistic, and there's a lot of license or some degree of license taken there. And for people, I know a lot of people encountered 4th edition and kind of rejected it, like, this is just a tabletop battle game and not a very good one. But we were having some degree of fun with it, a lot of fun sometimes with it, and that kind of writing, that sort of AP, that it put a different light on the game, and made, I think, a lot of people and me see it from that point of view, that no, you can have these kind of character things. You can use the game. Maybe it's not necessarily perfectly suited for this type of storytelling, but it's possible to see the game that way and play it that way and have this rich inner character life or cool approach to it.
Yep.
And that kind of stuff, we talked about this in one of the Hangouts, I think, Jonathan, about having a really good hook, a really good setup for your game, sort of launching the campaign successfully, because a lot of RPGs don't really tell you how to do that very well. But AP almost always does. When you read someone's game where they set up their Traveler game about all the guys in Cryo that got unfrozen together on this derelict jail ship, you're like, man, that's a role-playing game. Like, Traveler's cool, but that's what the game is. That's this thing that this person created for their actual play at the table. And so I think, reading a lot of those things was a huge influence, on me at least, for really thinking about how do you start something successfully, how do you hook people, how do you get everyone to make characters that are going to launch more stuff and make people excited to see what happens next and all of those kind of things. Yeah.
It's nice it's funny because I liked the AP stuff, and it definitely, they got read and they got people tell me that they like them, and that's really nice. And that definitely eggs me on to do more. But then the other thing that eggs me on to do more is now I can look back 10 years and I can read about those games, and it's a relic of this old time, and that's really great. Now some of those people who are in those posts are like scattered to the four winds, but I still have those posts, and we all go back and read them and email each other and be like, oh, I was rereading about this game, and I miss you guys, and I miss that game, and that was a good time. So it's become even more now, where it's like, well, you know what, I want to write about this game, so in 10 years I have that, because it's really nice. It's really a good thing. I like that a lot. Thumbs up.
So To build on what John said a little bit, I think one thing, the things it emphasizes for me is the importance of sort of campaign design as an area that doesn't really get talked about in game books often so much. And sometimes in the Game Master section, they'll have a few pages where they're like, have a catchy premise, blah, 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 blah. But when I think about, reading Judd's AP or like listening to John talk about how he set up his 4E game with the Raven Queen and all this other stuff being sort of prime aspects of it,
Yeah.
it makes me think about how I wish, I mean, in some ways it doesn't matter that the game techs don't talk about it because I think the communities do. I think, we've always had people writing AP about, yeah, we're playing 4E and we're going to, start in the dead body of this ancient god that's like floating in space and we're going to like work up from his toes all the way up to his head and like fight demons all the way and stuff, right? And you're like, okay, sweet. I want to play that, right? But I don't want to play, goblins in a wagon on the road or whatever, like there's a way to design a and that really gets at the core themes of the game that you want to explore, right? Rather than like sort of wandering your way there, right? When I think about like all the AP that I read with you, or like Storn, or like a lot of these guys, right? Like I feel like one of the things you're really good at, and Luke too is really good at this, right? Is sort of like picking a really punchy thing and going right after it from the beginning.
Storn is like the AP All-Star because, I mean, with the Daggers and Deviltry thing that John mentioned, Storn was drawing at the table. So I would see these, pieces be coming out as we were going. I was like, shit, I've got to write about this because it's going to be illustrated, for God's sakes. Storn's going to let me put the pictures in it. That just made it really, really pop. It was really cool. I mean, that's unreal. I mean, I miss Storn just as a human being, but having someone there, like, sketching the game as you game is fucking crazy. It's just really nuts. I can't even.
Yeah, I definitely jealous of commercial level artists in their group. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The campaign design thing is interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I when I think of the good books for that, I mean, it's weird because like Unknown Armies has a lot of ideas per paragraph, right? But I've heard of people who look at the second edition book and don't know what to do with it, which in some ways puzzles me because maybe it was the difference between the first edition and the second, because the second really has so many good campaign concepts per page that it kind of astounded me. But again, that didn't necessarily show you. I think that game showed you, hey, here are a bunch of good ideas. It didn't necessarily show you, hey, here's how you make your ideas.
Yeah,
I think that's trickier. That's a trickier deal.
I wonder if it's a kind of branding issue too, to some degree. Like, I love Unknown Armies and I've had a lot of fun with it. But
yeah, me too.
When I think about it, what immediately pops to mind is crazy mishmash of occult concepts and weird situation. I don't think of a specific sort of hook or idea or thing, and it's a strength of that game that you can play it so many different ways and there's so many different approaches, but it doesn't jump into your mind like, say, Shadowrun, right? You're like, okay, Shadowrun, I get it. Like, I totally understand that game. It can go all these different places and stuff, but we know it's going to be a troll with a machine gun breaking into a corporate headquarters stealing data. Like, that's the game. It's really easy to get it. I don't know.
Yeah, Nobilis had the same issue as what you guys are talking about, Unknown Armies, is that it was such a high concept game and kind of open-ended to what you did with it, right? So there wasn't a really solid hook to be like, we're going to do this thing. And I do think that can be good, even if it's a very open-ended thing, right? At least if you have a place to start, it makes the open-endedness easier to branch off into in some ways, or to create yourself an opposition to it. You're like, well, normally Shadowrun games are about this, but this Shadowrun game we're going to be about corporate stooges who are like trying to crack down on these crazy runners or whatever, right?
Yeah. And maybe these simpler or like more compact hooks are the domain of sort of modules and stuff, at least when it comes to Unknown Armies and things. Maybe that's the way they did it. we never really got much into the modules, although I heard good things about them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what they were thinking of in terms of sort of presenting the game.
Yeah, as I recall, second edition had two big ones. One was about the fast food chain, and the other one was about like going on a big road trip or something. Both of which sound like much more like focused topics.
Yeah, and Stoltze had that book, One Shots. Is that what it was called?
Yeah. I didn't feel like those were really strong. I don't know. They're interesting modules, but I don't know. I remember the last time I opened up the Ars Magica book, or the Ars Magica book, the Unknown Armies book. I opened it and I saw a sentence that said, "You're a bunch of Las Vegas magicians who just stumbled into true magic. Go." I was like, oh shit, I want to play that. And I literally just closed the book and then put it back in the closet. I was moving, and yeah, it's those kind of little crunchy things that give you a character concept almost right off the bat, and I don't know. I wish there were more modules that didn't assume that you were bringing the group into the module, but that assumed that you were making a group for the module. That was like, okay, everybody sit down, look at, open up the module. There's a cover that's evocative, and there's the back blurb. Read it. Make up characters. Now, the GM should have read this and this. Now go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. I think, I don't know. Maybe some of the Paizo stuff is like that. The Adventure Path stuff. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's just the way I would play it. But
yeah. I do think that's the way I tend to play modules, but I do sort of wonder, like you said, do most people just plug them into the existing campaign that they have, right, or sit down to play an arc or something? And maybe that I tend to play games that way even without the modules, right? Kind of get together people, you're like, we're going to play a Apocalypse World campaign. It's probably going to be like 12 to 20 sessions, and the premises we're going to be the people in charge of this old airstrip.
Right.
And we kind of have that from the beginning. So I don't know if that's just my default mode of play, maybe. I don't know.
Interesting. Apocalypse World is another one. I think that's an interesting. That opening, is kind of. It's kind of left. I mean, you could do a lot with just make your characters. All right, now we've kind of got our setting, because there are a lot of characters with plenty of setting design in them. But you could also get a bunch of Ronin. There is the option of taking a bunch of playbooks. You could end up with a Battle Babe, a Chopper. A driver, a bunch of these wandering gunslinger types who go town to town, and you don't end up with any setting out of the playbooks. And you kind of have to think of now what.
Yeah.
I never had a. Yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just saying, in some games, what I do is I sort of ask what kind of apocalypse there was, right? Was it zombies? Was it nuclear? That sort of can help frame things, but. That's not what Vince necessarily says to do, right? You're supposed to just sort of wander around and see what these people's lives are like.
Right.
So,
I think though that there is, at least in my mind, there is a lot of similarity there between Unknown Armies and Apocalypse World in that core concept kind of way that I was saying. When I think of Apocalypse World, I don't think of have you seen that really awesome framework somebody made? I wish I can remember their name right now. I think it's called The Dark, where the end of the world was darkness, and
oh wow.
But if you go out into the darkness, you just never come back, and so keeping lights burning is this thing that everyone does. And
wow, that's cool.
So cool. It's such a great. I mean, you hear that, and you're like, oh man, I really want to play that. And he has moves for when you go into the dark or when you're left alone in the dark, stuff like that. But when I think of Apocalypse World, I do think of it kind of like Unknown Armies. Like, okay, yeah, there's going to be this cool, sexy apocalypse that's kind of psychedelic and weird, and we're going to have cool characters doing stuff. But what specifically that is that campaign creation phase where you sit down with everyone and go, okay, what are we going to do here? What's our hook? What's our driving thing? Yeah, the playbooks. You're right, Judd. The playbooks definitely do have a huge impact on that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
history too. Yeah.
It if Unknown Armies had playbooks and they, it was like a magician that just touched real magic, like that would prompt that direction for play, because you would pick it. it would kind of like give you that direction to pursue that you might not choose.
Yep. Yep. Interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and it does have the organizations. That there is something there with the different factions of Unknown Armies where, you can real easily be like, okay, you're all agents for TNI or the New Inquisition, or the other folks. But I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, I think I don't want to be down on Unknown Armies too much. I feel like it's more a question of presentation. Like successful play isn't. It doesn't. I don't think it hurts you to have an awesome game of Unknown Armies, but I think it might hurt the kind of image or accessibility of the game to an outsider thinking about playing that game if there isn't some kind of some hook right away. Like Ars Magica is an example where you can do so many different things with that game, but it is its sort of brand is very strong. You're a group of wizards that are secluded, and you have your soldier guys and servants that live with you, and you play like seasons of their long lives and blah blah blah. That's more narrow than, say, it's a medieval fantasy magic game.
Right.
It already gives you that little bit of a box, and we certainly as gamers we do that. And I think Jonathan, you were totally spot on when you said maybe it doesn't matter that the game books don't help us a lot because the communities do, and I think that's true.
Yeah, and probably Cam would want us to say that they're working on Unknown Armies 3 right now, so maybe it'll be a little bit more focused.
Wait, who's working on it?
So Cam over at Atlas, right, is organizing the 3rd edition of Unknown Armies, I think.
Oh man,
I think so. Yeah.
On that completely, that's awesome.
Yeah. That'd be exciting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. I heard part of it that they were going to try to pare down the focus a little bit, that it was going to be different from 2nd, but I don't have a lot of details about how that's going to happen. So.
Wow, that's one of my favorite games ever. So I'm pre-sold on that.
Yeah, me too. I've had a bunch of things. I remember a bunch of threads where people were like, "How would you hack Unknown Armies?" And I'd be like, "I'd play Unknown Armies. Actually, that's what I'd do."
Yep.
That's what I would do. Yeah. That game is awesome.
Yeah, and I was actually pretty thrilled with what they did with the new Feng Shui. So I'm excited to see what they do revising the other lines over there.
Nice.
Yeah, New Feng Shui was great. Another one of my favorite games. I was expecting to love it because I love Feng Shui, but I was skeptical going into that playtest. Like, does it really need to be changed at all? And is it going to be better? Are they just changing it for the sake of changing it? I was happy to have a cool new book and everything, but I was a little bit like, I don't know. But yeah, it was actually it was at 98%, and they found that extra 1.5% to just like tweak it up and make it just that much better. It's really, I was very impressed by that.
Nice, that's awesome. That's nice to hear.
Yeah, the really killer app I thought was the way they have archetypes now. You just kind of grab one and start playing. There's like very little care gen that happens before the first session, and then your character sort of evolves quickly over the course of the game. So you start out with this, you're like a killer assassin, or you're this very rough archetype, which I think fits with the way that sort of action movies are, right? In the beginning, you're just like the thug with the baseball bat or whatever, right? But it really made it easy to jump in and play and not have to deal with character creation really at all, hardly. You make a few choices, boom, you're there.
We were in the first edition, but there was still a little bit of business to do to finish them. Not very much, but just a little bit. And they took that little bit out. And like you said, like the advancement is on the sheet. It's very easy to see. Yeah, they've made that part of it that slightly a little bit better. And the way shticks work now is like even slightly better than it was before. And there's like more of a shared pool of shticks, kind of. And like the bag full of guns or whatever isn't just the what's his name, the gunlugger equivalent guy. I can't remember his name right now. Now, like, bag full of guns is a thing, and one version of the killer gets it at level 3, which is the best version, and the everyman hero has it at level 1 to start because he has a shotgun in his truck or whatever. And it's a little easier to understand the game because you have a more overlap between character types and rules. Rules-wise, it's not just your little special snowflake that you have to constantly explain to everyone.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know. I could go on and on about that revision. It's so great. I'm really glad the Kickstarter was a huge success. It's super cool.
Nice.
And visually,
I think in Ithaca, I lived with one of the few cabals of players who still loved the collectible card game.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I would see people playing it at the dining room table all the time when I lived upstate. So it was when I saw the Kickstarter, I immediately emailed it off to a half dozen friends and sent it to them. So it's good. I'm glad that's.
They still do Shadowfist tournaments at Gen Con, I think. Willow Palachek is like a huge Shadowfist killer. I think she won 1 year or something.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It's intense. That's a fun game. I never got into CCGs really, but I enjoyed that one. It's cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've heard good things.
Yeah. Speaking of Willow and 4E, just to cross things, Willow's working on this awesome kind of 4E hack called Exploding Kingdoms. Just to give a shout out to it. It's trying to take like the board gamified aspects of 4E and make them even weirder and over the top. So
Nice.
It's a pretty cool project. So
cool. There's this other scaled down hack of 4E called 5E. Actually, is what it's called.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your
hack of 4E and previous.
It's funny because there's a lot of 4E in there, and there's more than people want to admit because it's hip to hate 4E right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like ideological 4E was a failure and a failure that made the New York Times bestseller, and that's with every book that came out with it, and whatever. I think there's a lot of 4E in that book. I joked with Matt Weber the other day, and I was like, they basically like took the 4E pill and they broke it open and they put it in the applesauce of old school D&D, and they like stirred it all around. They were like, here, have some applesauce, and it's like, this is really good. And they're like, yeah, like it's got a little medicine-y taste. They're like, no, just have another thing of applesauce. That's been my 4E to 5E metaphor joke.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how you did campaign design in your current game. I was kind of interested since we were talking about that.
I was reading a lot of old school stuff and thinking about hex crawls and what I would do with it. And I think what's interesting about hex crawls is that the players kind of come up and surface and then have no idea what they're in for. So I was basically trying to figure out a reason why that would happen. So I just came up with this hopefully not too long and not too convoluted reason, and that was that the surface world and the Underdark had war, and they were just about to totally destroy each other, so they sealed each other off from one another. And there was basically this vicious archangel that like stopped people from going up to bottom and stopped people from going bottom to up, and it said, we're going to just separate you two for 1,000 years, and the 1,000 years are up. And you're the first. The players are the first people to come from the Underdark to the surface and see what the hell's going on. And it's fun. It's been fun. So that's the premise. And it's been good. It's been all right. The premise is okay. It's kind of explory, and people who have played with me, who are in the game, who have gamed me a bunch before, like it's a little slower than usual games, but. And they ran from a couple of combats the first couple of games because they were smart, and they just ran like hell from a couple of random encounters. But I've just been leaning really heavily on random encounter tables. Like that's basically what I've been running the game off of. I like the background drive stuff, but I don't look at those when I make the game, like when I make an adventure, like I do beliefs or whatever aspects or whatever the hell. So it's fun. I'm liking it so far. I'm really curious to see the DMG. I'm really curious to see the experience points. The 3 pages that are apparently dedicated to experience points, which is a little aggravating. But we'll see. We'll see. It's okay. It's fun. The art is fantastic. The art is really, really amazing.
That's interesting to hear. Yeah. I haven't really gotten into them. Just the covers I was not a fan of at all, but I'm glad to hear the interior art is good.
Yeah, it's solid. Yeah. I knew that things were going to be better when the art director said that. Was it the art director for D&D or the art director for Paizo? I think it's the art director for D&D said our most common art direction was, why aren't they wearing pants? And I was like, oh, this is, yes, fantastic. And people have online have said that means the game is prudish, but it's not so. There are still plenty of scantily clad people and sexy people in the game, but it just means that there are ladies who are in fact wearing pants. In our pathetic gender world is revolutionary, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. What is it like trying to run the game on just the player's handbook?
You kind of fall back on your old reflexes, which I think is what they want anyway. I think they're trying to make that kind of Rorschach blotch thing going on. It's okay. I wince every time I have to say race, though. Every time I have to say racial ability, I just go, oh.
Yeah.
It bugs the shit out of me, and it makes me really, it's nice to have been playing games where that's just not in the lexicon. I didn't realize how much I was enjoying that, not having that be a thing at the table.
Or to be able to talk about race at the table and have it mean race and not have it mean weird fantasy thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Every time I say racial ability, I'm just like, and my lady friend with her background in anthropology just goes, and we all sigh at the table at the same time. So that's good. Like, everyone's sighing together. There's not one person being like, oh, get over it, we all sigh together, so that's nice.
Yeah. But, there's clearly a dissertation to be written on race and class in games.
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, race abilities and class abilities, it really is like this weird... it's just funny. It's funny
so tone deaf. It's so completely tone deaf. It could only have been written by a certain, privileged group. But
yes,
it's a Marxist nightmare or something.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I don't want to indict them as villains. I don't think they were, but I'm really glad it's something we can talk about now, and it is something that people are not tone deaf to anymore.
Right.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it is cool that it's something that seems more and more hokey, even though it's spread into the wider culture through World of Warcraft and other stuff, right? Where now everybody knows what it means about fantasy races and fantasy classes or whatever.
Right.
I still have hope that someday the language and all that will change. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a strange thing. Overall, it's fun. It's been a fun Friday night game. So.
Sweet. Are you using grid or anything, or how do you run in fights?
No, I like the draw shitty maps on pieces of paper theory of. I like, it's kind of a apocalypse world, burning empires school of thought where you draw a shitty map and you draw a bunch of arrows all over it, and then you yeah, I like that more than grids and all that other nonsense.
Yeah. Do you find that the shittiness of the map makes it like less representational, right? So people are sort of more in an imaginative space, or
I hope so. We've had a couple of little fights here and there, but we haven't had a really good drag out oh shit battle. We've had a couple of things where people have run. We've had a couple of things where like they've gotten hit and they've run, or they've hit something, but there hasn't been a really dig your heels in pitched battle. They've been kind of, they're coming up on second and third levels for some of them, and they've been real antsy, especially since if it's daytime, some of them are looking at huge disadvantages. But yeah, I don't know. I think the hot tech for this one is the advantage die. That's really cool. I liked it when it was in white hack, and I like it when it's in the new D&D. I think it's really, really, really nice tech, is to be like, you can say, okay, you're above them on the steps. You have an axe. You get a second D20, and you roll, and you take the higher of the two D20s. That's super cool. Or you're with a spear in a small space. You can't use it real well. You get a disadvantage die. Take 2d20 and take the lower of them. It's super cool. I like that. I like that aspect of it. It lets the GM kind of give them modifiers, because otherwise, +2, +3, it just doesn't. It's not satisfying. But handing them an extra die is super satisfying. That's really, really, really the hot tech of I think, of the game so far.
It's contextual and based on a human judgment call.
Yep.
Which obviously we love that kind of thing, but embedding that in a game that also has sort of mechanically driven effects.
Yep.
It seems like it might be a nice marriage of, okay, this is on my character sheet. I can count on this. I get my thing because of who I am.
Right.
But also there's this other thing I can get because of where I am, what I'm doing.
Yep.
The fictional details play into it, but it's not all fictional details, and it's not all driven. It's like both, which I think is a lot of when people talk about their sort of militant OSR kind of play. I feel like that's often what they're talking about, where it's all about rulings.
Right.
But it is at base sort of mechanically derived, that this is your strength score, this is your whatever, and then what you can do in the moment is all kind of up for grabs.
Right.
And I think it'd be really simple too, is an interesting way to approach it, because when it was bonuses, you could get into this weird place, and I think for me, 3rd edition definitely fell into this sometimes, where it was like, okay, you have this advantage, so you get +2. But it's also dim, so you get -2.
Right.
And you're also at medium, so you get -2. And they're prone, so you get -2. But you have this power that cancels prone, and you go get a bonus against prone, it's +4. And you would just this laundry list of numbers to find out, okay, no modifier.
Right.
Whatever.
Which I think happens in this too, but you just kind of throw them all together and be like, you end up plus, minus, or equal. Like if you're plus, then you get the advantage die. If you're minus, then you get a disadvantage die. If you're equal, then it just evens out.
Yeah.
So it just, instead of doing all that shitty math, you just say, boom. And it kind of
conglomerate it in your head, right? And be like, okay, there's all these factors, but at the end of the day, how do we feel about this?
Right.
Feel like you have a disadvantage? I think so. Okay, all right, we'll give you that.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really good about it is it puts the role in the player's hands rather than the GM's bonus, right? So like even if the result is basically the same as getting a +2 or +3 or whatever it is, because the player's rolling it, right? It feels like you're in control of the situation, kind of, right? So it's definitely about the feeling that you get when you make the move, rather than putting all these bonuses together and then figuring out what the result is, right?
Yeah.
That's definitely something. Well, I might change the topic here. I'll wait until we run out on D&D 5. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm over it. Yeah. Where are you taking it?
Are you talking about feelings of mechanics?
Yeah. Well, for Blaze in the Dark, I'm trying to do something very similar, actually, which is this 3-move structure, and it definitely hits that same vibe of, okay, is it kind of on equal footing? Does one party have a huge advantage? I guess that's basically the question. The 3 moves are player facing, so they're like, you're a big underdog, you're kind of equal, or you're a big, you're very dominant.
Right.
And that is somewhat similar to the advantage disadvantage dice. Although one thing I'm trying to do, it seems like it's working pretty well so far in playtest anyway, is not just moving the bonus and penalty per se, but changing the outcome space. So when you're equal, you're much more likely to trade blows and compromise and kind of mix it up in a dirty foot way. When you're really dominant, the outcome of the dice doesn't allow you to whiff. You can't make your stealth check and sneak up on the guy and hit your crit and do 1 point of damage, and that kind of, cascade of problems that sometimes happens. And then when you're in the desperate position, you can't, sort of easily turn the tables or whatever, but it's not totally symmetrical because the game favors the PCs in this model, so when you're desperate, you do have a little bit of an edge statistically to get out of your bad situation. And
interesting.
so yeah, that's been working really well, and so much so that I kind of don't want to go back. I'm feeling really like attached to this now, and when I think about playing a game where I can like do all the work to get into a dominant position and roll a 1,
right,
all disappear.
Right.
That bums me out to think about that, and I wonder what it'll be like, because I love running like Stars Without Number or basic D&D games like that where that can happen, and I wonder what I'll do when I run a game like that again in the future. I might just hack it and play it with like changing your position actually changes your outcome space, not just your probability.
Interesting.
Phase.
I mean, it is really hard to get that 1 with 2d20, take the best.
Yeah. Which is awesome. That's really cool.
Okay, and I think that is the big problem with D20 is that you're rolling this damn D20, and I've seen people in older games, particularly in 4E, where people would just get, they would get die fucked all night long. They would just have a bad night.
And you might as well not have shown up, right? Sometime.
Yeah.
Doing a battle mat fight for that evening, which could be really fun. If you miss all your attack rolls and the enemy doesn't hit you, it's like you didn't play. It's like your character wasn't present because of the dice.
Or your character just soaked up resources that otherwise could have gone to other things. Yeah, absolutely. So it's nice to have something kind of offset that. I like that. I like that aspect of it.
It's interesting. Like the deal is. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was just thinking. The inspiration mechanic that lets you like bank an advantage die, right? When you've done something to like get inspiration, and then you like have this floating advantage die that you can call on. Is that how that works?
I don't know about that one.
Okay.
I think
I played the playtest a long time ago. They may have changed that rule.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know that one.
Yeah, it was kind of like a spiritual attribute sort of thing where you'd like charge it, sort of.
Oh, there is there is inspiration, which can there is inspiration points, which can like give you an advantage for a roll.
Is that like in the moment though, or is it like you have this?
You can bank them because you get inspiration, almost like you get Artha for playing to them.
Oh, okay.
The problem is that the examples in the book are pretty bad. I didn't like them, which is a shame to me, because I would love future D&D modules to be like, hey, these are beliefs and whatever the hell the other things are called that you could have for this module that would really work well.
That'd be cool.
Or here are things that your characters should be attaching beliefs and interests and shit to. Since the D&D Classics is up, let's have Dragon articles, if Dragon ever comes back, where it's like, hey, want to play Barrier, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks? Here are some example beliefs and interests and, whatever's. I forget what the hell those things are called, which is terrible. I should have a character sheet on it.
You're saying based on the content of the game, right? Like these are the things you're going to be encountering, so these are things you have beliefs about, yeah.
Yep. And the other nice 5e piece of tech are backgrounds, and some of them are really obvious, but it's neat when you make them really kind of cross ways. So, for example, my friend Laura is playing a thief scholar, right? So she steals books, and it's just kind of cool. That kind of like cross thing is kind of neat. You can have a monk acolyte. So like you're a monk who like kicks ass with your hands, but you also can totally marry people and give the dead some rest. So it's neat. The backgrounds kind of give you a link to some piece of the world, which is really cool. The other thing is they're super easy to design. So I feel like they reside in the place that I kind of always wanted prestige classes to reside in.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think good prestige classes linked you to the setting, and these link you to the setting, but they're stupid easy to design, right? They're just maybe deceptively easy, and I just haven't designed one yet, but they're pretty easy. It's not like designing a whole class where you have all these balance things to worry about. So I really like that aspect. I like the backgrounds a lot. Backgrounds and advantage dice, I feel like, are the two things that they've really gotten right in this edition.
Sounds really cool, especially because if they're easy to hack.
Yeah.
For campaign design too, you could be like, hey, here's the set of backgrounds, maybe some custom ones too.
Totally. I want to make one for Messiah. That's one that's in one of my notebooks that I write on my way to work. There are a bunch of good ones. There's Criminal. There's and they show how to hack some. I think there's one where there's one particular background, and they're like, here's how you could change this background into being a spy. I think it's Courtier. And they're like, here's how you can change your Courtier into being a spy, and it's really simple and super cool. It's nice. It's nice to have things that link you directly to the world. Folk hero, criminal, spy, performer. So for example, so Brett is playing a fighter who also has like a gladiator performer. So he's pretty much an orc pro wrestler. And it's been stupid.
Brett is playing this character, did you say?
Yes, of course. It's like all of Brett's favorite things all at once. He's getting his cake, he's getting to eat it too, he's getting his chocolate, his peanut butter, he's getting it all. And of course, when they show up to like a Githzerai monastery and he's like, can I fight your master? They're like, of course you can.
Yeah.
Awesome. Like all the monks come and they bring their terrible tasting beer from another plane and they get drunk and they watch a fight. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun if you, especially I hope that there's something in the DMG about like your players picked a background. Be cool about it. Seriously, just be cool. Like, let them find if they're playing a scholar, then let them know where the libraries are. Like just don't be a dick. Because I think that there's a lot of room to say no, you don't know where that is. And it's like, well, it says so in my background. Can I just have a damn link to it, please? It's nice. It grounds those heroes because I feel like D&D heroes are kind of not as grounded as maybe I'd like them to be, but this really grounds them into the setting in a cool way. And you're absolutely right. It would be super easy to do setting design. I can even think of, you could just change this game into Dark Sun, like, that with like a bunch of backgrounds, merchant, what were the, merchant, Templar, water seller, desert raider, you can almost see what they would be, artifact hunter, and go to town.
You can even imagine hyper-specific ones for specific campaign, right? Not just merchant, but like merchant from this specific place, right? Yep. Member of this specific criminal organization, right?
Yep.
Like lots of things you could do, right?
Oh yeah. You could say like, if you pick the criminal background in this game, this is what it'll mean. Yeah. That'd be super. That'd be a super cool way to.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. But yeah, it's neat. That's the other part of the game that I really like. I'm curious to read the DMG and see where that pushes me one way or the other, but we'll see.
Brett's orc character reminded me, we played a 3rd edition game that was super fun. Phil and Tony and I, we all picked half-orcs without really talking about it. We were just like quietly making our characters at the table, not talking to each other. And we realized we're all half-orcs, so we're like, okay, cool, we'll all be like sort of cousins or brothers or something. And
yeah.
It was dungeon crawl style D&D, so the GM had like one of the 3rd edition modules that actually had a dragon in it. So we were like, man, if we're gonna play this, we're gonna fight a fucking dragon. This is Dungeons and Dragons. I want a dungeon and I want a dragon. So he was like, okay, cool. There's a module that had like a third level with a dragon in it. So we made 3rd level half orcs. We did the dungeon, and we came to our first decision in the dungeon, like left or right, basically. And I said, Vishnar demands we go right or whatever, and the other characters are like, "Now we want to go left." So I wrestled them down to the floor and like held their heads under this in this like fetid pool. I said I did that, and the other players were like, "What?" And the GM's like, "Everyone make strength checks." And I won, and so I just held them all down, like, "We go right," and they're like, "Okay, okay," and that became the campaign rule. Every time we got to a crossroads in the dungeon, we would wrestle each other, and whoever rolled the highest strength check would decide where the party went.
I've heard of much worse ways to do that, so that's fantastic.
That was so fun.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, Brett. Let's see. He fought the Githzerai Kung Fu master and lost, but they went to this city called Big Shire, which is like the halfling kind of Los Angeles. It's like this huge shire that's just spread out over miles and miles and miles. And it turns out there's a big underground fighting scene there. And Brett won I think they don't call it heavyweight, they call it the tall championship because he's tall. So he like beat the shit out of this, blonde Swedish supermodel looking elf to win the heavyweight championship. It was fun. It was fun. And now he has that belt and he totally carries it around.
Oh man, he really is getting his cake, isn't he? Jeez.
He is. He totally is.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was fun. It was fun.
Is that are you playing in any other games right now, Judd?
Yeah, I'm playing another weird one where I'm mashing a couple of things together in a weird way. I'm playing a Burning Wheel game, but I'm using the Paizo Kingmaker Adventure Path, which is kind of hex crawly, and the players, my players are Rachel, who is an amazing Burning Wheel player, and my buddy Drew, who is a librarian who I've known for years, and they tapped into something that was in the module that I didn't really notice. Like I was like, all right, guys, here's the situation. You guys are sword lords or someone appointed by sword lords of Rostland, and the Dukes of Estovia are coming in to destroy Rostland. That's just going to happen. They're going to destroy it. So you're being sent south with a charter to explore the southern stolen lands and settle it so that when refugees start to come, it'll be settled. And they're like, oh, okay. And they just tapped into this thing about Rostland being doomed that it's clear when you type it, but then like I don't know, they just really tapped into this sense of doom in the sense that they're bringing these seeds of this culture with them, and they're it. Like Rostland is going to cease to exist soon, and it's interesting. It's been neat. There's been some death. Drew's character got mauled by a bear, and it's been good times. It's been a lot of fun. I really like that game a lot. It's been good. It's weird. Adapting modules for Burning Wheel is kind of a dance, but it hasn't been like a lot of work. And Paizo has done so much cool shit over the past 6 months to a year that I was just like, shit, I want to support these guys somehow. I'm kind of intrigued by their adventure paths. Let me see if I can make something work in a way that's fun. And it is. There's a lot of editing to do because, but it's fun. That
sounds really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
How did you deal with there's a pretty high degree of investment in the campaign arc when you make a Burning Wheel character, or
right.
Or at least like that one of the characters comprises a big portion of that arc probably.
Right.
And it sounds like with this it might be possibly even more so. What was it like when his character died? Was it kind of this? Was it an issue, or was it not, or what happened?
It felt kind of perfect in a weird way. Yeah, it just felt kind of perfect. They had this long I let the conversation run really long, which is weird for me. Usually if a conversation goes more than 20 minutes and it's like duel of wits or shut up, you know? But it was a really interesting conversation. I felt like I needed to let them get it out. They had just had this interaction with some bandits, and the bandit lord was about to let them go, and he said something that set Drew's character off that was like a veiled threat, and he was like, fuck this. And he took out his sword, and he fucking slaughtered everyone. Just made good rolls and sent them a bunch of, they failed a bunch of steel tests, so the bandits just scattered. He killed their leader and then hunted the rest down one at a time, and it was just nasty. And Rachel's character Rachel's knight really wanted to make some friends and not rule this land with a bloody fist. And they had this really interesting philosophical argument about how to do this. And they didn't come to any conclusions. And Drew was like, I'm glad you're going to rule this land someday. Someone like you should do this, but you need people like me because they're fucking bandits. And then they go out in the woods and they fight a bear and he dies. And so it just like leaves her in this weird space of like, oh, like this was my like sworn sword brother, and we just had this thing where he admitted to like not being a good person, but a bad person who had to exist, and now he's dead. So it would have been perfect if it would have been fine if he had survived too, but it felt like a really fine place for him to just die and leave her totally unresolved, you know. And now we're kind of talking about who his next character will be, and I think that'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, no, it didn't, you know. I think the cool thing about Burning Wheel is like, well, I guess that, you know, if the character dies with a bunch of unresolved beliefs, it's like, there they go. I guess they don't get resolved, you know. Or make a character who's like the brother of your old character who wants to come in and resolve them from a different angle.
Right.
That's
some
totally
of them get picked up and some of them get left behind too often.
Yep, absolutely.
That sounds amazing. That's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it was good. It was really, really fun. What else?
Sorry, before you move on, I just hang on. You just said something that reminded me of a technique we've been using lately. You mentioned the 20-minute conversation, duel of wits or shut up, which is awesome. Although in our local group that is more like 5 minutes maybe.
Yes. It depends on the group. I had two friends who I used to game with who are now both lawyers, and they would argue for the sake of arguing for an hour, and it was so neat.
People do that with planning. They'll plan forever.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Go on, John. I cut you off.
Oh no, it's fine. So I took an index card and I wrote with a marker huge on it the word skip. And I put it out on the table and said, okay, this is a button. This is on the DVD player of our game.
That's awesome.
When you want to skip this thing, when you want to skip to the next chapter, just say it or touch the button or whatever you want to do. And so, yeah, now when we get into these planning things where people are trying to come up with the exact right way to infiltrate the whatever, someone will be like, skip. Let's just roll strategy. Let's just roll strategy, and we'll see how good our plan is, and let's do the friggin' thing.
Yep.
So I think that might be going into the game now, maybe as an official thing, but I think as a general technique, it might serve some groups out there as an option.
That's interesting. I think a whole I mean, it might be really useful to have every DVD player thing on there, you know, to just be like skip, pause, stop, back.
I actually have something in the text right now that's about fast forwarding and rewinding. Because I feel like if you have that ability to skip things, that can create some anxiety sometimes.
Right.
Players like, yeah, but what if we skip it and then later we're like, oh man, we really should have brought the climbing gear. Fuck. If we planned it, we would have remembered, but because we skipped it, So if you introduce the safety net and say, look, it's okay, we're allowed to rewind too. We're allowed to have a flashback. We're allowed to pause.
Nice.
Pause is another one that it isn't on a card actually, but it's something that one of the players in this Blades group started doing, where we're in that space between talking about what we're doing and assembling the dice pool and rolling, and that can get kind of muddy sometimes, or there's a pressure to like get through that as fast as you can or something, or
right.
that transition can be awkward sometimes. And yeah, maybe I should put a pause card on the table too, but that's essentially what they've been saying is like, okay, wait, stop. Okay, we've talked about it, hang on. Now we're going to do the thing, okay, and now here's the result, and now we're back, and we hit play again, and we go back into the game. I love that idea, Judd, to actually have like all like the literal like set of controls.
Yeah, to have all the little buttons, you know,
on the table. Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
It would feel especially appropriate for like a cyberpunk game or something, right? Where we're talking about 80s technology or something.
Yeah, right.
Or PTA, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, playing through the DVD box set. That's a lot of fun. Because like the difference between pause and stop can be the difference, you know, between like, hey, what was that character's name again? And wait a minute, this is fucked up. Stop.
Yeah,
Stop.
Right.
Yeah.
The kind of stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop the DVD, guys. This is bullshit. Something just happened. I don't like it.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah. And the rewind too can sometimes be like, you know, I wanna know what that was like. You know, like so when something has already happened in the past, right? And you're like, you know, oh, we had that argument, blah blah blah, and then blah blah blah. But you're like, well, what actually got said there, right? Is it because now it matters, and before it didn't matter what people said in that argument, but now it matters, right?
Right.
And then you can back up and be like, well, we know what they decided. They decided to do this thing, right? But like, how did that happen, right? Let's see how that works.
Yeah. I need to include that text. I was treating it right now as the as a do-over rewind. Like, you know, don't be so concerned about getting it right.
Right.
It's not improv theater here. Like we're allowed to fuck something up and then be like, oh no, you wouldn't have even, that guy wouldn't have even been there because before, I forgot about that. He's not even the right dude. Like,
right.
All right, forget it. Let's go back. All right, so he's not there. You don't bring that up. You're talking to her about this other thing. Let's do a do-over. We do that a lot in our local game, and I think sometimes there's pressure to like, don't mess up the continuity and
right.
Make sure you remember everything perfectly, and
well, that's just impossible, right? You can't remember every single thing that's ever happened in your game.
Yeah, I really want to give people more permission to be very loose about that. As long as you have consensus, you can just do whatever you want. You can just like,
yep.
You know what? I don't like this whole deal with the Russians. Can we just not do that anymore? Let's just forget it. That's just out of our game now. I'm bored. We've been dealing with this stupid thing for weeks. It's not going anywhere. It's 2 weeks later. It's in our past now. Let's just go on to the next thing. That kind of freedom is so nice. Yeah, but the also like go. Let's pause and like rewind to an earlier scene and see what happened.
That's like a microscope technique, kind of, right?
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I've been trying to cultivate this phrasing in I'm running Apocalypse World Dark Age playtest, and basically it's MC'd like pretty much exactly like Apocalypse World MCing with different principles and stuff, but the make their lives interesting to you clause I think is slightly different. I forget exactly, but it prompted this thought, and I've been using this phrase in Dark Age. It's working out really well. It's a 3-player game. It's Sage and Paul and Shannon, so it's like the Apocalypse World All-Star PvP gold medalists, you know, at the table, and all I have to do is just sort of, you know, say, but would you be there when she's talking about this? And then the game just like just explodes. But I've been as they're playing, as they're sort of doing all the business of the game, and I'm kind of watching them. I've tried to be more of an instigator, but doing it with the phrase "I'm curious." So Shannon says something. Sage and Shannon's character had just slept together, and it's the next morning, and they're in the encampment, and we're about to move on to the next thing. They really need to talk to Paul's character and like possibly get him out. Hi, Dante. So instead of trying to make it like, okay, let's frame a scene where blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I've been trying out this thing of saying, you know, I'm curious, at breakfast at the encampment the next morning, what's it like between you guys now?
Right.
This is the next morning, and do you normally, like, you know, eat together, and this is no different, or has it never happened before, and this is the first time, or are you avoiding each other? Like, I'm curious what the vibe is.
Yeah.
And just trying to get that curiosity phrase in play over and over again. When you say this to him, I'm curious, like, can he tell that you don't really believe this, or do you really believe it? And it's become so easy. I mean, with really good players, you have so much material to work with. But it's been really fun to just sort of let them go and not try to be a director or try to frame scenes or anything. Let them just play, and then whatever occurs to me as an interested member of the audience.
Yep.
Try to ask that, and it's the same thing, right? It's ask questions and build on the answers. It's normal apocalypse world stuff, but framing it as curiosity, as sort of like, this is just something I want to know, not is this going to make a more exciting game, or is the group in this direction? It's just pure self-interest, and that's been driving the game really well so far.
Nice.
So your game is driven on fan service, apparently.
Yeah, basically. And that goes back a little bit to what we were talking about before, where because of the setup for that game, or one of the versions of it anyway, that we are doggedly still playing, despite revisions, because of that setup and because of the sort of premise, we have created like a cool show that I'm watching as the GM, and I am essentially writing a fan letter when I ask those questions. With a less compelling setup and less interesting characters, that technique might not work because my curiosity would not be nearly as piqued.
Or you'd have to ask more pointed questions, right?
Yeah.
Drive things more.
And that I think makes it feel somewhat artificial, and that's why I think sometimes people learning this style of GMing feel pressured to come up with cool questions. You know, I need to think of that cool question that's going to provoke something neat to happen next, instead of just looking at what's happening in front of you and going, "Oh wow, wait, I'm curious. Do you really mean that? Do you really mean you would do anything?
Right.
Anything really? Do you mean that when you say that? I mean, no one can tell if you don't want them to. You keep it off your face. But I want to know inside your character's heart.
Right.
Do you really mean that? It's just stuff like that like just, I don't know. It's just driven by sheer curiosity, and I kind of don't need to care if it makes the game sort of better or cooler or anything. But it does. It just is a byproduct of that.
Nice.
And getting inside, man, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I'm just going to keep going. Getting inside the characters' internal lives is something that this group has gotten super good at. And I feel like I've mentioned this before, but there's another technique we use all the time, which I just love, where we have this total division between what is actually being said and seen and experienced, and the kind of other channel of the game, which is either pure subtext or internal stuff. And a lot of the times it's NPCs where I say, you know, you're talking to the Knight Commander. He doesn't say to you, this is the last chance I'm giving you.
Right. You've
used up all of my goodwill, and one more move like this, and you're going to lose me. He doesn't say that to you. You're talking about something else, but that's what's happening right now. Everything about him is saying,
nice,
this is the end of it if you don't shape up. And then that can drive things like where someone goes, oh, I want to read him. You know, I want to see if my character like can get inside there, or ask that question. That question becomes really interesting now. Like, how could I get you to forgive me, or whatever.
Yep.
Once you open that channel, it gives you a lot of tools to play with.
I feel like that's like the more advanced version of, when the characters ask you, is he lying? Can I roll something to know if he's lying? And you as the GM be like, oh no, you don't have to roll. He's fucking lying.
Yes. Yes.
He's lying to your face. Like, he's lying. Everyone in the room knows he's lying. Everyone knows. He's motherfucker is lying. When he says you have safe passage through town, he does not mean that one bit. It's like, now what? Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of radical transparency is really interesting, and I think it's one thing I struggled a lot when I was running Monster Hearts, because Monster Hearts specifically doesn't have a read a person move for very specific reasons, because they want adults and kids to kind of have this weird thing where like nobody really knows what anybody else is thinking, and and so I felt like I did more radical transparency than probably I should have done in the game. People were much more like, but I also feel like some of that's part of like how teenagers are, right? Where people come up and like say something nice, but that they don't mean it. They mean it like a punch in the face, right?
Right.
So I was having trouble figuring out how to get that sort of double meaning across, which is also true. That's how parents act too, right? They're like, oh, I'm always going to love you, but the subtext, blah, 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 as long as you're doing these things, right, or whatever. So
I think the difference here between like a dial for preference when it comes to immersion stuff, because if you want immersion and you're playing Monster Hearts, having that channel is destructive to immersion because you're sharing stuff that your character doesn't know. But if you don't want that kind of immersion, I feel like it gives you a really great tool in Monster Hearts where you can say, he doesn't really mean this. He's telling you this because he cares about you and he's afraid that you're getting into trouble. And then they, as a player, can say, yeah, but I don't get that at all. I don't understand what he really means. And there can be dramatic irony where we as the audience know what's going on that channel, but you can play your character as ignorant of it and really like shine a spotlight on the deficiency of that teenage experience or whatever. That does not work if you're trying to be immersed in your character's experience. Kind of.
Right.
So you have to make a call there, I guess, on what you want out of it.
Yeah.
Did we lose Judd? Judd, I think you're frozen.
Am I? You're moving. Jay isn't.
Okay, sorry. It was momentary. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, there. Jay's moving now for me.
So, yeah, was there more to talk about there, or should we move on, wrap up? What do you guys want to do?
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. I'm good.
Jonathan, is there anything you're playing right now you want to talk about, or developing, or any just general stuff?
No, not too much developed from last time. I'm working on a sort of beta draft of Restless. I'm going to try to put up on print on drive-through cards. So it's going to be a different kind of format than drive-through cards normally has. They have these 6x6 cards that they normally use for tiles, like for dungeon maps and stuff. But I'm going to use them to be the cards for the game. So it's going to be
nice.
Interesting. It's going to be like 15 6x6, almost like a mini record kind of awesome cards. So hopefully have that up in the next week or two. Got some good feedback.
The link I can put to Restless in the description. Is it PDF somewhere?
Yeah, there's a PDF. I can send it to you.
Okay, cool. I'll put a link in the thing.
Cool.
Nice.
So that's my next project. But yeah, just trying to put together a regular group of folks. I want to play Atlas Reckoning, and I want to
oh man,
play some of the games that I have in development. You played Atlas Reckoning recently, yeah?
Yeah, I did. Oh my god, that game is awesome. I'm so in love with it.
What is it?
Strauss and Giovanni are developing a game based on Pacific Rim and Knights of Sidonia and Evangelion.
Nice.
That kind of giant mecha.
Yeah.
and so it's kind of list stagey in broad strokes. You go on missions and get all stressed out and messed up, and then you have personal scenes where you deal with that stuff. And
Nice.
except it's GM-less, which I guess list stage is kind of GM-less, but this game is truly GM-less, and the monsters are like D&D board game Ravenloft monsters. They just no one has to run them.
Oh, cool.
So in each, like Pacific Rim, each mech, each atlas is piloted by a pair of people who are in this like neural sync with each other, which has a really cool mechanic that I'll mention in a second. But so if you only have 2 players, you play pilots in your atlas, and there's these cool archetypes, kind of playbooky archetypes that you choose from, the hotshot or the hunter and stuff like that. They give you special moves, but then the monster is just a set of powers and a draw of playing cards that you put out, and you make decisions on how you fight it, and then based on that, it attacks the atlas back, sort of automatically following a little script. So you don't really need a dedicated person to run the monsters, and if you have 3 people like we currently do, there's 2 pilots, and I'm kind of facilitating and doing the monster-y bit, but we're adding a 4th person on Wednesday, so he'll be my co-pilot, and we'll make an atlas, and then Allison and Keith will have their atlas, and we can start doing like 2 atlas at once missions, fighting 5 kaiju or whatever. It has a campaign arc with like a little table that shows you like, okay, the first mission is, if you have 1 atlas, it's 1 category 1 behemoth, and if you have 2 atlases, it's 2 category 1s, and it like ramps up, and if you win or if you make it through all 10 campaign scenarios, humanity wins and you defeat the monsters, and a battle takes about 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh, nice.
And a stress sequence takes 20-ish. So we got through several cycles in one sitting. It has cool campaign things where you upgrade your atlases and you upgrade your weapon modules and sensors and stuff. And the downtime scenes are really cool. It's a little bit like List Stage in that way too, where you sort of play a brief sequence and then there's an outcome that says, you clear this much stress, or you give someone else a bonus draw in the next engagement, or there's a bunch of different outcomes, and they're all different by playbook, which is really cool. Some playbooks are good at starting fights and getting into trouble, and some playbooks are good at relieving other people's stress, and everything in between. But one of the coolest mechanics is when you start the fight, both pilots draw their hand. It's a playing card-driven game. You draw your hand of 5 cards, and then each pilot lays a card face down to represent their neural sync. And then you turn both of those over, and if they're the same, if they have nothing in common, you're desynced when the battle starts, and you can't tell each other what move you're going to choose. You can't nice. Strategy.
Nice. That's really clever.
If they're the same color, you get to discuss your strategy, but you can't look at each other's cards. And if they're the exact same number, you can do whatever you want. You can show cards. You can talk about anything.
Oh wow!
Here's the really fun part. Whoever plays the higher card in the sync sees into the other one's memory.
Nice.
And based on the suit, gets to ask them a question. So hearts are passions. Diamonds are, philosophies and memory stuff.
That's clever.
There's a list of sample questions. So right out of the gate, you sync up and you ask like, okay, what's your biggest regret?
Right. And
not just tell me what it is, but we're in this shared virtual reality memory space, so we see it. We see you doing X, Y, Z. Tell us about that.
That's awesome.
It's so cool, and it really drives that great anime feeling of we're pilots fighting monsters, but really it's about our internal lives and our emotions and feelings. And histories, and man, it's super fun. And what I love about it, because it is a lot like Blue Stage, which is one of my favorite RPGs, but it's like Blue Stage fast, the fast version. I don't know. I was going to say light. I don't know what to kind of compare it exactly. It's just so fast playing. And because it's GM-less and the battle stuff is very gamey, I think it's going to be a really good first-time RPG experience for people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
It'll be
15
really
minutes
easy.
for a complete thing is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
It also is cool that the monsters are this like impersonal force too, right? That you don't understand exactly because you don't interface with the player when you interact with them necessarily.
Yeah, that's true. They're a little bit unknowable when it starts, but although in our game it definitely our part of our premise is that the Atlas is actually this like captured alien technology,
Right.
and the neural gel is where the aliens are like brains in jars. And there's a thing you do at the beginning where you answer a bunch of questions about your setting to like guide you to a cool premise. And the alien brain runs the alien tech, but they have these big, powerful brains. So when you take it out of the neural gel, to get humans to operate the stuff, you have to put 2 people in to like carry the load of the alien tech. So right out of the gate, we're like, wait, so the pilots wear these like cling film neural conductivity wetsuits and like slide into this tiny neural gel pod where they basically have to sort of embrace each other inside this crystalline pod filled with gel, and like that's not going to be sexy and problematic at all. That's no. Mm-mm. Yeah. Yeah. So we're aiming towards a HBO series, I think. With
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Does anybody call putting the gel on getting lubed up or anything? Or is that
Yes.
not?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, and we had a wonderful sequence. You do locations when you do stress. You pick one of the location cards, and they tell you like what that place is like. They give you a series of 4 questions. You answer one of them every time you go to that location, and then there's different stress scenes to pick from. So the GM doesn't have to set a scene or something. There's no GM. So you're like, okay, I want to go to the dive bar. I'm going to pick the stress scene where we see the pilots playing some sort of game. What do they play when they're there? And how does your character participate or not? And how do they react to the situation? And then one of the questions was, what illicit substance is sold at the dive bar? And Allison said, oh, it's the neural gel.
Oh. Nice.
People use it recreationally. And as soon as that was out, we were like, oh, man, yeah. So the next time we were at the dive bar, what game do people play? What's the recreation here? And Keith's like, oh, it's like mind wrestling, basically. People like rub the gel in their hands and slap arms at the table and then like mentally battle each other to see who'll tap out first. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's wonderful. It's in beta now. I think the public beta will be announced real soon on Google Plus and other places, so you'll be able to get your hands on it and start playing it.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've hit our time roughly, more or less.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for hanging out and chatting, you guys. I love it. It's really great to do it. So appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's nice to see you in person again, Judd. Kind of.
Yes. Nice to see you guys.
Been too long.
Yes, way too long.
Okay, thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate it. Please feel free to ask questions in the comments, and we'll probably respond to those kind of things. And we'll be doing a new one pretty soon. Actually, I'm going to arrange to do with the Atlas Reckoning players and Strauss. We're probably going to try to do a hangout where we just talk about the game and our experiences with it, and do a little sort of live AP playtester feedback thing. So that'll be coming up soon. I'm going to stop recording here in a second. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. You guys don't have to hang up. I'll just stop the broadcast and we can.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.